So before we get started on this week's episode, let me tell you about our presenting sponsor, Hunt to Harvest. Now, Hunt to Harvest is back with us for our second season here at 3 Wide. And right now, if you head over to hunttoharvest.com, you can check out their new spring collection of shirts, both in turkey hunting, duck hunting, and several fishing options. They also still have their mystery box special going on where you can get 3 shirts chosen at random sent to you for just $33. So you don't want to miss out on that deal. Head on over to huntharvest.com. Click on the mystery box option there at the top, select your size, and when you go to add to cart and check out, be sure to enter that promo code RADNEY18923 so you can get even more savings at checkout. And this is all at huntharvest.com. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of 3 Wide. I'm your host, Radney Crawford. This week we're going to be going over the action from Sunday's race at Richmond International Raceway, where Kyle Larson gets his first win on the season, locks himself into the playoffs, and this was the first real test for this new short track package that NASCAR's implemented. We saw it earlier in the season at Phoenix. I feel like Richmond was going to be the first true test for it, and I have to say that this was a step in the right direction. It was a much better race than what we've seen in recent memory at Richmond, and especially last year at short tracks, period. You saw a lot more passing this year, over 3,800 passes under green flag conditions compared to just over 3,000 last spring's Richmond race. And we had more cautions this year than last season. So that is definitely a good sign for this package. I also think a big component to that was the tire fall off. We saw, how important fresh tires were for this race Sunday. We don't see a lot of that as often anymore, but it definitely made a big difference. And I think that helped this package even more. Now, with the success of this package, it definitely has people looking a lot more forward to the upcoming short track races like Martinsville, as well as the All-Star race at North Wilkesboro, where during the test sessions, drivers were already talking about how big of a fall off they were experiencing with the tires. So NASCAR's got to feel pretty good. This is a step in the right direction, a step forward, not a step back. Obviously, still work to be done. It's nowhere near perfected, and it's always going to be a constant work, but credit to NASCAR for taking the steps necessary, and I think it paid off big time for them Sunday. You were seeing guys running all sorts of different lanes, all these different lead changes. It added, a lot more excitement to Richmond than we've seen in recent memory. Now, with Kyle Larson's first win on the season, he's now locked into the playoffs, but there were 4 other drivers that really stole the headlines from this race, and that was Christopher Bell, Ross Chastain, Denny Hamlin, and surprisingly JJ Yeley. Now, Denny and JJ, they got tied up early in the race. Denny was in the back of the pack trying to work his way up through the field. And coming out of turn 4, he was underneath Chandler Smith, and JJ got a run on the inside of Denny, sent him 3 wide. And Denny kind of got squeezed there. And as you can see, when they go into turn 1, NASCAR on Fox, they had, the in-car camera on Denny, and you got to see the perfect shot of what looked like Denny running through the back of JJ going into turn 1. Now, Denny, in his podcast this past week, he mentioned the incident, said obviously he did not mean to get into JJ, but he kind of misjudged it. He said JJ let off the gas about 100 feet earlier than he had been, and Denny just simply got in the back of him. From my viewpoint, and from the way I read social media and several comments, it's the general majority feeling that this was an intentional spin by Denny on JJ. Denny's not going to go on his podcast and say that it was intentional, obviously, after the deal with the Ross Chastain comments after Phoenix, where Denny got the points penalty and the fine. So it's no shock there that Denny came on and said it wasn't intentional, but it just looks to me like Denny did not care for how he was raced and sent JJ on into turn 1 and sent him around. And it's unfortunate that you see these, when these small teams get crossed up with the bigger teams, that if they're stuck in the back, like Denny was Sunday at the first start of the race. For these smaller teams like Rick Ware Racing, points are just as important to them as it is the playoff contenders, the guys running up at the front, because each point they can get, that is going to help them in the owner points. That is going to help them, possibly have a bigger purse at the end of the season. So every point matters for these guys. They're going to scrap and fight for each position they can, and it gets a lot more dicey back there. So it's unfortunate to see Rick Ware get a torn up race car over this deal. JJ, he was not happy in the garage, excuse me, with some comments to the media where he basically said for a guy that has been talking so much and preaching about, respectful driving and drivers being so disrespectful on the track, for him to go out there and do that, it's, not a good look on Denny. And, with this incident, and as much as Denny has been on it with respectful driving, it makes Denny's words seem hollow. Now, Denny is a great mind on the business side of sport, I believe. He is a great driver. He is a Hall of Fame driver, future Hall of Fame driver. He's been around the sport long enough to know he knows the limits to push. He knows, how what it means to get in the back of somebody going into the corner. The most notable incident was the Chase Elliott incident at Martinsville years ago. But Denny's got this appeal hearing coming up from the penalty with Ross Chastain. Denny's not wanting to do or say anything that would hurt that appeal process, especially with his comments, and that's what got him in trouble in the first place. But it'll be interesting to see if that has any blowback on his appeal hearing. Now, the second incident, which was, I think, the biggest one, was Ross Chastain, and Christopher Bell, where it's a late restart. You have Christopher Bell on the inside row, on the second row, Ross Chastain behind him, behind Ross, Michael McDowell, all these drivers lined up on the inside. And going into turn one after taking the restart, as soon as they crossed the start-finish line, you saw McDowell make a move to the inside of Ross. Ross makes the same move almost at the exact same time and keeps McDowell from going around him. Then you see Christopher Bell look like he was going for a block and kind of backs off, thinks better of it. But unfortunately, going into the turn, he wasn't able to get the good angle. He wasn't going in the line that he was intending or needed to. And he went up the track and spun out William Byron and sent Byron into the wall. And immediately post-race, Christopher Bell was making comments to media members Noah Lewis, Bob Pockrass, and several others, calling Ross Chastain's move a bonsai move, calling Ross the wrecking ball. That basically is just another incident with Ross where over-aggressiveness and takes out other drivers. But obviously you can see in the replay there was a lot of room between Ross and Bell before Bell even made contact with Byron. So that was pointed out quickly from fans, and even Ross Chastain, Noah Lewis and Bob and several others went over to Ross to gather his thoughts. And Noah makes the comment to Ross, hey, here's what Christopher Bell said. And Ross just kind of rolls his eyes and makes the comment, it's funny that these guys say all these things about me, to you, to the media, to cameras, but when Ross is around, they are silent. They don't say anything. And Ross mentions that he never touched the 20. He never touched anyone. It was just one of those racing deals. It was coming to the end of the race, and he saw a move he could make. He went for it, and there was nothing dirty there on Ross's end. It's just simply a driver going for a spot, and Bell went to block it, misjudged, and took out another driver. But what we're seeing now is drivers kind of use Ross either as a scapegoat, or if they think since he is so close to them when the incident occurs, well, there's Ross. He had to have made contact with me, or he had to have some part in it. And Ross seems to be kind of, over this, this reaction from drivers. If they're not going to come up and say anything to him, he's just going to shrug his shoulders and move on. We see the rivalry with Ross and Denny, but Denny has been willing to meet with Ross, to talk with Ross. They've talked things out, and while they may be rivals, I believe there is a respect thing there. I think if these drivers continue to talk about Ross behind his back, he's going, pretty much be like, get over it. This is how I'm going to drive, and if you don't like it and you don't want to come say anything to me about it, I'm just going to keep pushing it through. So how this does going forward. Now, Christopher Bell did apologize post-race on social media after he had seen a replay. He apologized to William Byron for getting on to him, but funny enough, he didn't apologize to Ross Chastain. Now, he may do it through a phone call, text, or when they see each other in the garage this weekend at Bristol, who knows. But it's interesting to see Ross kind of filling in this role. I don't want to use the intimidator line, that was used so much on social media, but Ross is building that presence that when he gets around, it does make drivers nervous. It does seem to be make them make, irrational moves that they normally wouldn't. It sets a seed in the back of their mind that, hey, what is he going to do? And they don't focus on the task in front of them. So that's going to be fun to watch from Ross throughout the rest of this season. And honestly, the rest of Ross's career, I don't see Ross changing anytime soon or at any point in his career. I think this is who he is, and he's just going to embrace it and ride with it. He's not necessarily the guy with the black hat, kind of the anti-hero. A lot of fans rally around Ross, support Ross, and you saw that a lot this past race after the race on Sunday when Christopher Bell made the comments he did about Ross post-race. And that'll wrap up this week's episode of 3 Wide. As always, thank you for joining me and watching along. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their week. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to this channel before you sign off so you know when our new videos drop. Also, you can follow any of the links below in the description to where my weekly podcast can be found. It comes out every Tuesday night. Just hit that subscribe button whether you listen to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and several others. And I hope everyone, as I said, has a wonderful rest of their week, a wonderful Easter weekend, and enjoys the racing action this weekend from Bristol Dirt.